Hello and welcome to episode number 7 of the Joe Cannon Health Podcast. I am Joe Cannon, and today's episode is going to be about rhabdomyolysis, one of my favorite topics to talk about. I work it into almost every conversation I can because I think this is something people need to be aware of. Now, I've been talking and teaching about rhabdo for well over a decade, and finally, thank goodness, people are starting to discuss it as well. The problem, however, is a lot of people are getting it wrong, and I get why that is. People tend to repeat what others say, and there's a lot of clickbaity websites out there. But as the guy who literally wrote the book on rhabdo, I wrote the first book on exercise-induced rhabdomyolysis. It's simply called Rhabdo. I really think I need to talk more about this. And I've not yet done a podcast episode on it, but this is the first, and I'm sure there's going to be many others that are going to follow this. And it's actually one of the reasons why I wanted to do a podcast, is to help educate people about rhabdo and why it's so serious. This is definitely something anybody who exercises need to be aware of and familiar with, and hopefully not get it. And that's one of the things I want to do today. Is we're going to talk about the myths of rhabdo. There are 7 big myths out there that most people probably believe are true. And I want to talk about those myths, bust them if I can, and then give you some idea on how not to get rhabdo, okay? Now, before we go any further, I want to give a quick shout out to 3 people who left me 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. They are Sandy Tread 52, PJ's Mom 07, and Joel CPT. Hey, gang, I really appreciate your kind words. It was very kind of you to do that. Very nice. It made my day, and for a new podcaster to have 3 5-star reviews so quickly, that was very nice. So you made my week, and thank you very much. Now, another thing I want to do, starting with this episode, is I want to do the myth of the week. And goodness knows, in the world of health and fitness and wellness, there's a lot of myths out there. So I want to take a short part of every episode and just quickly bust a myth. And the myth of this week is going to be about lactic acid. Now, anybody who exercises knows that when you work out, especially when you work out intensely, your muscles may start burning. And you wake up the next day after exercise, your muscles are sore, and you may think that your muscle soreness that you feel is due to all that lactic acid buildup inside the muscles while you're exercising. That's actually not true. This is a myth that's been around 1,000 years, and it's probably going to be around for 1,000 years more, but there's really not any evidence for it. Lactic acid, or lactate as it's sometimes called, is a compound that's made inside our body when we're making energy, and it's associated with that burning sensation you feel in your muscles when you're exercising a little bit or a lot more than you're used to doing. Now, the thing to realize is that when you stop exercising, about 30 minutes or so, 60 minutes later, that lactic acid is pretty much gone. It's recycled. It's not around in appreciable quantities the next day when you wake up and your muscles are sore. That phenomenon of feeling sore the next day or two after exercise is technically called delayed muscle soreness, or delayed onset muscle soreness, DOMS, as is often reported in the research. And that actually is what I often call the biggest mystery in exercise science. You know, we've been looking for an actual cause of where this pain's coming from for a very long time, well over 100 years, and we're still not quite sure where the pain's coming from. So it's, I want you to realize that lactic acid buildup during exercise and the pain you feel the next day are 2 totally unrelated phenomena. They have nothing to do with each other. But it makes sense people would confuse them because, muscle soreness, muscle pain right now when you're exercising, and you wake up tomorrow and you're sore again, you think they're related. They're actually not. So, myth busted. Lactic acid has no place, no role in the feeling of soreness the next day after exercise. So now let's get into the meat of this episode, which is, I said, is rhabdomyolysis, also known in the popular vernacular as Rhabdo. It's actually the title of my book. Right off the bat, I want you to realize that, again, I not only wrote the book on Rhabdo, I've been investigating it for over 10 years. I've been teaching about it for over 10 years. I've been on TV, radio, podcasts, newspapers. You Google my name in Rhabdo, all kinds of stuff pops up. I've even consulted in court cases revolving around rhabdomyolysis, go figure. So I'm a bit of a rhabdo nerd, as I tell people I start my morning every day reviewing the rhabdo research, and I've been doing that for a number of years. So again, there's a lot of myths out there when it comes to rhabdo, and I've looked on some of the different websites and YouTube videos, and I see a lot of myths perpetrated. And I want to shine a light of truth on some of these myths, and again, help you understand it better. Now, what is rhabdo? Well, the thing I would say is rhabdomyolysis, the word literally translates into muscle fiber death or muscle fiber breakdown. That's what the word means. Rhabdo means rod-like. The muscle fibers look like little rods under the microscope. And myo means muscle, and lysis means destruction, death, annihilation. Okay, so the word literally means muscle fiber destruction. And when the muscles break down, they release their contents, their cellular contents into the bloodstream. Some of this stuff can be pretty dangerous in high concentrations. And, it's interesting when people tell me, what causes rhabdo. We can go into the biology of it, but I really don't think that's really going to help most people. What I usually tell them is when it comes to exercise and rhabdo, the thing that causes it is when we do a lot of stuff we're not used to doing. So rhabdo often occurs when we do a lot of things we're not used to doing. If the exercise or activity is new and unusual or something we hadn't done in a long time and it's repetitive, you're doing it over and over and over again, and you do enough of it, well, the likelihood of rhabdo increases. And again, that's really the way I often describe rhabdo to people. Again, the biology is complicated. I don't think it serves most people to go into the biology of it. It's, biology basically is when our need for energy is greater than our ability to make it. This causes a cascade of events which leads to the phenomenon occurring. But when you look at, who's getting rhabdo across the board, it's when they're doing a lot of things they're not used to. And so that, I think, helps people understand it in the real world the best way. Now, if you've heard of rhabdo, you may have heard of some of the symptoms and signs of this phenomenon. And again, real quick, I'll just go through some of the more common things you may have heard of. When people get rhabdomyolysis from exercise, they often tell me that they are experiencing very intense muscle pain. The pain is, again, unbearable, people tell me. One person actually told me they wanted to kill themselves. The pain was so bad. Again, so very, very intense muscle pain. You may have heard of kidney failure resulting from rhabdo. That's due to a protein that's toxic to the kidneys in high concentrations. That protein is called myoglobin, and that's actually going to give rise to one of the myths I want to bust. But another thing that people may not be aware of is that your liver enzymes may go out of whack when you have rhabdo as well. So sometimes doctors will test your liver enzymes. Rhabdo is serious, and it is as serious as a heart attack. There literally have been people who have died from rhabdomyolysis-induced heart attacks. People have died from this condition. So again, I do think this is something people should be taking seriously. It's one of the reasons why I get so animated when I lecture about this phenomenon. Another symptom that freaks people out is that their arms and or legs swell in size. You can see the swelling. Sometimes this swelling can be so dramatic that people may not be able to bend or extend their arms and legs anymore. One person told me her legs swelled up so much that she couldn't put her jeans on. This swelling is significant, and in extreme cases, doctors may need to do surgery to relieve that pressure. So again, rhabdo is definitely no joke, to say to the very least. Now, another symptom that people may experience when they have this, and I'll go into greater detail on this in the myths, is the dark-colored urine symptom. As when people get rhabdo, they sometimes notice that their urine changes color. It's sometimes described as looking like iced tea or cola-colored. Again, I want to address this myth because I think this is the one thing that people tend to hear over and over again when it comes to rhabdo. But let's leave the signs and symptoms alone for now, and let's talk about the myths. I've got 7 myths for you that I want to bust. And myth number 1 is what I think is probably the biggest myth. It's the dehydration myth of rhabdomyolysis. I see a lot of people on social media with rhabdo, and a lot of them beat themselves up. They sometimes say, well, I was dehydrated and that's why I got rhabdo. The thing you need to realize about this phenomenon is that drinking water during exercise does not stop muscle fiber death. Let me say that again. Drinking water during exercise does not stop rhabdomyolysis from occurring. This is a myth that I don't know where it all came from. I have some suspicions, but it's actually not true. Drinking water is great during exercise, but don't think it's going to prevent rhabdo from occurring. Remember, rhabdo happens when you do a lot of things you're not used to doing. Drinking water has no effect on any of this stuff. The problem, however, with the dehydration myth is that it's overemphasized in the news media and on websites and in videos, etc. The thing that I got to talk about when it comes to this is that remember that rhabdo can affect the kidneys. Now, if your kidneys aren't working so well, and you're combining that with drinking lots of water, because that's the only message you often hear, drink water, drink water, drink water. Well, where's the water going if your kidneys aren't working so well? You're not peeing so much. People with rhabdomyolysis, sometimes their urine output decreases. Well, the water level is going to rise in your body, and this, in theory, could lead to a totally different phenomenon called hyponatremia. Hyponatremia is loosely translated into water intoxication. You drink so much water that you dilute the electrolytes, the minerals in your blood that conduct electrical signals. This is important because these electrolytes, they help our muscles work, they help our heart work, they help us think and conduct electrical nerve impulses. And if you dilute these electrolytes, then the electrical signals don't get to where they got to get to. And so your muscles won't work so well, your heart won't work so well, you'll get, your thinking may be off, you may actually go unconscious, and in rare instances, people have died from hyponatremia. So I think this is a message you need to get out to the exercising community because they are overemphasizing hydration during exercise in the thinking that it's going to prevent rhabdo. It will not prevent rhabdo. And in someone who does have rhabdomyolysis from exercise, it could bring about hyponatremia, and that's an entirely different animal. Again, if you're suffering in silence right now, you're in pain, you think you have rhabdo, I often tell people, don't go look into Dr. Google for the answer. The answer is you go to the emergency room, you call 911, you have them take you to the hospital and get checked out. That's the best way to know the severity of your rhabdo and if you do have rhabdo. Again, what the dehydration myth, again, is very prevalent. I hear this mantra chanted over and over and over again on different websites, and it's looking at the bottom left-hand corner of a very complicated picture. So that's myth number one. Myth number two is related to the dehydration myth, and that's the idea that rhabdomyolysis only affects the kidneys. We've already pointed out that rhabdo affects other things. Your heart can be affected, your liver can be affected, you'll have swelling in your arms and legs, all kinds of things can happen. So rhabdomyolysis is not a kidney-centric disorder. It can affect multiple organ systems. And so just focusing on the kidney by drinking lots of water is a short-sighted thing that people really overemphasize in the rhabdo community. Again, just looking at the kidneys is not gonna tell you the full scale of what's going on. And again, just focusing on drinking lots of water to protect the kidneys, again, could lead to hyponatremia in some cases. Again, it's complicated. And I want you to realize that it's not only the kidneys that are affected by rhabdomyolysis. Yes, kidney failure is serious, no doubt about it, but so is a heart attack, and so is hyponatremia. So again, self-treating by looking on the internet and just drinking lots of water is again short-sighted. So that's myth number two, the kidneys. Myth number three is related to the kidneys, and that is the urine color change. People with rhabdomyolysis may have seen or have been told about how their urine will change color. And the color change, it's often described as looking like iced tea, or your urine may look as dark as, say, a cola-colored beverage that may be in your refrigerator right now. I want you to realize that there is a spectrum of color changes that could occur. Your urine could look a little lighter than iced tea or as dark as, say, cola. So again, this is something that's very popularized on the internet and on maybe on news channels and newspapers, stuff like that, because it does pop up from time to time. The color change is due to myoglobin. That's a protein that's toxic to your kidneys, and that's what's changing the color of your urine sometimes. And as I often say, this is probably the most famous symptom of rhabdo, but I believe it is overemphasized. And I think that's a problem, because when people may get rhabdo, they may say, well, my urine didn't change color, so I didn't have rhabdo. That's technically not true. The thing that people need to realize is that you can have rhabdomyolysis but not see a change in the color of your urine. Your urine may just look, normal or a little yellow or something like that, but you don't have to have this symptom in order to have rhabdo. Now, I would agree that if your urine is looking like, Coca-Cola or something like that, iced tea, that's not a good sign. But you can still have rhabdo and you not see a visible change in the color of your urine. Now, related to this, I know sometimes people may not take rhabdomyolysis serious, so that actually could be another myth in of itself. This is a serious condition, and I remember one person telling me her workout friends actually made fun of her when she got rhabdomyolysis. Like, are you kidding me? This is a serious medical phenomenon. For those people who may not think rhabdo is a big deal, and I know they're out there, I see them using hashtag rhabdo on Instagram a lot, which is just crazy. But for those people who are not taking rhabdo seriously, I want them to think about this for a minute. If you have seen a change in the color of your urine's looking like, iced tea or something like that, that means you have lost at least 3.5 ounces of muscle. Let me repeat that. If you have a visible change in the color of your urine, it means that you've lost at least 3.5 ounces of muscle. At least 3.5 ounces of muscle has died from this phenomenon. For those of you outside of America, listen to me, that's about 100 grams. It takes about 100 grams or 3.5 ounces of muscle to see a visible change in the color of your urine. Now, I don't say that to freak anybody out. I just want you to realize that, muscle fiber death is what rhabdomyolysis is. And, it takes about 3.5 ounces of muscle destruction to see a change in the color of your urine. So, again, this is a serious phenomenon that I don't think people take seriously enough. I see people saying, oh, you just drink some water and maybe go to the hospital and you're okay. People actually sometimes even use rhabdo as a badge of honor. I'm like, that's crazy. Why would anybody, want to use this as a badge of honor? It's not. It's an unfortunate medical phenomenon that, I do think is on the rise. And I'll talk about that at the end of this episode. Now, what happens if you had rhabdo, but you didn't see a change in the color of your urine? Is it possible that you had a mild case of rhabdo? That's myth number 4. I often get questions from people who literally say that to me. Did I have a mild case of rhabdo? I was in the hospital, but I didn't see any urine change in color. Well, it means that maybe you didn't lose at least 3.5 ounces of muscle. It probably was some muscle fiber death, but it just wasn't enough to see a change in the urine color. So that doesn't necessarily mean what you had was mild, because in my opinion, it was muscle fiber destruction. I don't consider any case of rhabdo as mild, but I wanted to address this because it literally is something that I have been asked, and I see people, finding my website on the internet by literally typing in these words, did I have a mild case of rhabdo? And I even wrote a blog post on this, which detailed this. I don't think there is such a thing as a mild case of muscle fiber destruction. So again, this is serious because when your muscles do break down and they're destroyed, they don't come back. Human beings don't grow muscle fibers back after they've been destroyed. There's really no good proof of this. If it does happen, it's probably just a little tiny effect. It's probably not significant in human beings. We can make the remaining muscle fibers bigger and stronger. Sure, we can. Unfortunately, we have trillions of muscle fibers in the body, but when those muscle fibers do actually they die off, they don't come back. That should be a message to the people who don't take rhabdo seriously. Muscle fiber destruction means those muscles that were destroyed don't come back. Again, we can rebuild what we have left. Unfortunately, we have a lot of muscle fibers in the body. But, most people who exercise don't want to be thinking about, what, I lost muscle fibers and they're not coming back? Take that message back to those people who think this is not a big deal. This is a big deal. So, myth number 5 is the myth that only intense exercise can cause rhabdo. People are under the impression that you've got to go into the gym and, you got to work out like a Navy SEAL or a Ranger or a Marine or, a bodybuilder, power lifter, something like that in order to get this. I've even heard from some medical professionals who have espoused this opinion, and it's wrong. I have, over the years, encountered people who have gotten rhabdomyolysis from gardening. How about that? How about getting rhabdo from painting a room? Yeah, those people are out there. Again, remember, rhabdo happens when you do a lot of stuff you're not used to. If you're not used to 4 hours of gardening, it could, in theory, cause this phenomenon. If you've never painted a room and all of a sudden, you're painting a large room and it's taking you 5 hours to do, it could elicit rhabdomyolysis as well. One of the very first reports I ever encountered when I started looking at rhabdo goes back to the 90s. It was this young guy. They literally called him a bodybuilder, if I remember right. He developed rhabdomyolysis of the abs. And what did he do? He did 30 sit-ups a day for 1 week. Think about that. 30 sit-ups a day, 7 days in a row. He wound up in a hospital with rhabdomyolysis. So you may be saying to yourself, well, gardening and doing 30 sit-ups a day and painting a room, that's really not intense. The thing to remember is what's intense for one person may not be intense for another person. Okay, there could be some genetic aspects going on in some individuals that we may not be aware of, and there are genetic traits that could elevate the risk of rhabdo. That's a topic for another episode entirely. But again, what do they got in common? Gardening, you're pulling weeds and doing it over and over again. Painting, think about your motion of your arm as you're painting. Okay, and again, the same thing with sit-ups. Repetitively doing sit-ups without enough rest in between bouts of exercise. Repetitive over and over and over again, things you're not used to doing. That's why I keep coming back to this. I keep trying to drive that message home. Rhabdo happens when you do a lot of things you're not used to doing. That's the key. And if you remember that, then you're less likely to get rhabdo in the future. So it's not just intense exercise like what you probably are thinking about as intense. It's things that maybe we might consider less intense, which again, if they're repetitive and unusual, could elicit this condition. Now, myth number 6, it is related to the first one, and that's the idea that only strength training can cause rhabdo. Many people get rhabdo from lifting weights, whether it's with machines or barbells, dumbbells, body weight exercises, etc. And I want you to realize and understand that any type of activity, any type of exercise could bring about rhabdomyolysis. And this does include aerobic type exercise as well. For instance, there have been multiple cases of indoor cycling classes causing rhabdomyolysis. This has been going on for over a decade, if I remember correctly. And again, these are written up in medical journals. And again, I've looked at multiples of these reports. And again, one thing that is glaring to all of them is, what did all these people have in common? They were doing their very first indoor cycling class. They hadn't ridden a bike in years. And then all of a sudden they're like, I'm going to take an indoor cycling class and it'll be fun. And it's 45 or 60 minutes long. And they're riding their butts off. And again, think about it. You're doing a cycling class. You're pedaling over and over and over again. And you hadn't pedaled in a long time. And suddenly you're pedaling intensely. Again, you get the point. It's when you do a lot of stuff over and over again that you're not used to do, which can cause rhabdo. So that's really the key. That's what's causing all this. So I think any kind of indoor cycling instructor needs to be familiar with rhabdo, definitely needs to be telling people about this. I don't think that you should be just jumping willy-nilly into any brand new exercise class without actually doing a little bit on your own first. For instance, instead of just taking an exercise class for indoor cycling, get on a bike on your own in the gym and just ride at your own pace, maybe 5-10 minutes. Do that a few times a week for a week or two, and then take this indoor cycling class. I think just getting used to the movement pattern alone is going to help reduce this. And then when you do take the indoor cycling class, again, you don't have to keep up with everybody else. You just keep up with you. Again, it's as simple as that. So it's not just exercise that's strength training. Any kind of aerobic activity that is repetitive and unusual to the person can bring about this phenomenon as well. And then the last myth that I want to address here is, again, something that I think needs more attention. And that's the idea that rhabdomyolysis is a short-term problem. again, it gets back to sometimes people don't take it seriously. They think, you get it. Maybe you go to the hospital for a day or two, you drink some water, you're good to go in a week. No, not necessarily. I have encountered people over the years who have dealt with some long-term problems from rhabdomyolysis. Again, people have said to me, for instance, again, it's been several months since they've had the disorder, but yet they just feel tired all the time. They don't want to work out. And when they do try to work out, the fatigue gets worse. And not only that, but the muscle pain returns and their legs start to swell up. If they're, say, walking on a treadmill for, just like 15 minutes or so, the swelling returns, and maybe the arm swelling returns as well. What the heck is going on with this? Quite frankly, guys, I have no idea. I have never seen a clinical study or review article on Rhabdo addressing the potential long-term problems. Why is the body fatigued for a long period of time? Why does the swelling return? It's hard to say. My go-to answer is that people are still trying to recover from this really bad insult on the body, and it takes time to recover. Again, different people are going to recover at different rates, and that could depend on a number of things, age and intensity level of exercise and stuff like that. So it is complicated, but I do know these people are out there, and I don't think they're getting the attention they deserve, because I've heard their stories over the years, and I feel badly for them, and I wish I had a better answer. When it comes to recovering from Rhabdo, I often say, time and patience are your best friends. It is going to take time in some cases. So yeah, some people do bounce back, in a month, and they're back to fairly, routine exercise programs. And in others, they may be grappling with the ramifications of this for 6 months or more after they get out of the hospital. So again, definitely something this needs to be taken seriously by people. Now, related to these long-term issues, a couple things else I want to discuss here is that many people who get Rhabdo are depressed. And why are they depressed? Well, they can no longer exercise. Remember, Rhabdo happens in people usually who like to exercise. They're in the gym, they're working out. You take that away from them and they cannot go back to the gym and work out like they used to before. Well, they're losing some of their friends they see on a regular basis. They may be losing their social interaction with other individuals. And again, some people may be exercising to deal with other issues. Okay. And again, when you take that away from them, then what do they got? That's their therapy, for lack of a better term. So I think many individuals may be dealing with some depression after getting Rhabdo. And again, for the fitness instructors who are listening to me, I think this is something we should be thinking about. If you work with somebody who has had Rhabdo, realize they may be in a depressed state. And again, we have to treat them, accordingly to help them ease back into exercise. And I'll give you some ideas after I'm done with all this. Now, related to depression is that I do believe that many people are dealing with what I call a post-traumatic stress disorder after getting Rhabdo. And I call it PTSD because after writing about and talking about this for years, I've encountered a whole lot of people who've reached out to me. Some of them have reached out to me from their hospital beds, ironically. And it's interesting that when I read when they talk to me and when I read what they say to me in email sometimes, many of them say the same thing. They say, this is what they say to me. I've never heard of this condition before. It was the worst pain I've ever experienced, and I'm terrified to exercise again. Think about that. They've never heard of Rhabdo before. Most people hadn't. It was the most horrific pain they've ever experienced in their entire life, and they're terrified to exercise again. Rhabdo is a trauma. It's a trauma not only to the body, but it's also a traumatic experience to the psyche, to the mind as well. People, they like to exercise, but then they get this condition related to the thing they like to do, and now they're afraid to exercise again. I think this is a problem that nobody is talking about except me, and I've been talking about this for, again, a long time, and I have yet to see anybody discussing the post-traumatic stress associated with getting rhabdomyolysis. I think this is an under-discussed topic that I really do think we have to have this discussion with people. Again, it gets back to this is a real phenomenon. People are grappling with this grappling with this for a very long time. So again, there is a stress associated with this. Again, it could go on for a while. And again, for the fitness instructors who are listening to me, if you are ever working with somebody with rhabdomyolysis, rhabdomyolysis who've maybe had it, again, realize they may be depressed and also realize they may be traumatized. And so we have to, again, ease them into back into exercise, very, very, very gingerly, as I like to say. Now, when it comes to preventing rhabdo, I often say the best defense against rhabdo is education, and I really do hope this episode has helped better educate you on maybe what rhabdo is and what it isn't. Okay. Now, when people say to me, "Well, how do I not get rhabdo?" Again, nobody wants to get this condition. I often just say, "Listen, the easiest way to not get rhabdo is to be George Costanza." And they look at me funny, as some of you guys are probably looking at me funny now and saying, what the heck are you talking about, Joe? George Costanza, if you're not familiar, was a character in Seinfeld. And one of my favorite episodes of the Seinfeld TV show was when George decides to do the opposite. And once he does the opposite, his whole world changes for the better. And if you've never seen the episode, just hop on YouTube, type in Seinfeld do the opposite, and the episode will pop up and you can see what I'm talking about. It is hysterical, but it really has some merit to rhabdomyolysis. Remember, rhabdo happens when you do a lot of stuff you're not used to doing. Okay, don't do that. and when you don't do that, the risk of rhabdo goes down dramatically. So again, for instance, you're gonna start a new exercise program. Okay, great. You've never worked out before, haven't worked out in a long time. You don't start out with training only one body part at a time. You don't start out with leg day and chest day and back day and arm day and all that jazz. Rather, you ease into it. So the safest way to start an exercise program is to do a total body circuit training program. And if you've never heard of that before, it's basically one exercise per body part, and you just go from exercise to exercise, little to no rest. So you might do one leg press, one bench press, one lat pull down, one bicep, tricep, stuff like that. And that's it. When you pick like 8 to 10 different exercises and you only do one exercise per body part, well, then you're spreading the exercise out over a wide array of muscle groups. This, in turn, will dampen down your muscle soreness the next day, but it's also going to dampen down the likelihood of rhabdo to occur. Remember, rhabdo, a lot of people get rhabdo because they start out on day one doing leg day, and they do like 10 sets of legs, do like, 3 sets of leg press and 3 sets of deadlifts and 3 sets of squats and 3 sets of leg extension. You don't do that. That's more of a bodybuilding program. Again, if you're just starting out or you haven't worked out in a long time, you don't train like a bodybuilder. You gotta prepare the body for what's going to happen in the future. Okay? So easing in exercise, I do think circuit training is the best way of going about doing things. Don't spend an hour and a half in the gym in the beginning. Spend like 20-30 minutes. That's all you got to do, and then you slowly increase the time in the gym. And again, most people don't need to spend more than 60 minutes in the gym anyway. So again, ease your body into it, just so you know. Don't do too much too soon. Listen to your body. If you think you've had enough, you've had enough. This is actually quite really good information for people taking group exercise classes, because when people take a group class, there's that group mentality where individuals will try to keep up with the group and or try to keep up with the instructor as well. That's a problem, because if you've never done the group exercise program before, you run the risk of pushing beyond your mental breaking point, your physical breaking point, and again, rhabdo may become more apparent. So again, be George Costanza and do the opposite, and rhabdo will likely never darken your doorstep. Again, education, best defense. Hopefully this episode has helped you a lot. If you have ever had rhabdo, just throw this out to you, and you want to share your story on my podcast or on my website, shoot me an email. You can get me at either joe-cannon.com, joe-cannon.com, or supplementclarity.com. Each of those are going to go right to me personally. And, I'd love to hear your story, and, we can help educate other people on what happened to you. On my Joe Cannon website, joe-cannon.com website, I actually already interview multiple people who've had rhabdo, so you can go there and read their stories on what happened to them and when they were in the hospital, etc. Again, it's one of the reasons I wanted to do a podcast is I really wanted to give a voice to people who are dealing with this disorder. I don't think it gets the attention it deserves, and so I really want to make a difference in the lives of those individuals. Okay, so I want to wrap up this episode with the quote of the day, which comes to us from Albert Einstein, who said, "Try not to become a person of success, but rather try to become a person of value." Really great words. Until next time, guys, I am Joe Cannon, go out and make a difference.